My husband handed me divorce papers on Christmas night, right after we opened gifts. But he didn't expect the present I gave him would completely wipe the smug grin off his face. Stay with me as I walk you through my story, and if it strikes a chord with you, I'd love for you to share it forward, drop a like, and stick around for more. My name is Aaliyah Monroe. I'm 32 years old, and for the past 8 years, I've been married to a man I thought was my forever. His name is Darius. He's 35, a successful corporate lawyer who knows how to put on a charming face in public. Everyone admired us as the perfect couple. They never saw the cracks forming inside our walls. To the world, he was kind and loving. At home, he was cold, distant, and always made me feel small. That Christmas night started like any other family holiday. The tree lights glowed softly, the smell of roasted turkey still lingered, and torn wrapping paper covered the living room floor from earlier gift exchanges. I tried to hold on to the warmth of the season, even though deep down, something felt off. Darius had been quieter than usual, staring at me in a way that didn't feel like love, but like calculation. After our families left, it was just the two of us. I thought maybe we'd sit together, enjoy some hot cocoa, maybe talk about the new year. But instead, he reached into his leather briefcase and slid a thick envelope across the coffee table. My hands trembled before I even touched it. I opened it slowly, and there it was, divorce papers. He leaned back casually, as if this was nothing more than a business deal. "I'm done pretending, Aaliyah," he said, his voice sharp but calm. "This marriage doesn't work anymore, and I want out." I felt my heart pound in my chest, but I refused to let a single tear fall in front of him. It was Christmas night, and here he was ripping our life apart without a shred of guilt. For a moment, the room spun, and I thought I might collapse. But instead, I drew a deep breath, folded the papers neatly, and placed them back on the table. He smirked like he had all the power, like he expected me to beg or plead. But I didn't. I just looked him straight in the eye and whispered, "Are you sure this is what you want?" He nodded, smug as ever. What Darius didn't know was that while he thought he was in control, I had been carrying a secret of my own. A secret that would flip everything upside down. I didn't say it out loud that night, but deep inside I knew. The gift I was about to give him would ruin his smile forever. When I look back now, I realize the cracks in our marriage started showing long before Christmas night. It didn't happen all at once. It was little things, small cuts that kept bleeding until I could no longer ignore them. Darius used to tell me he was proud of my career, but somewhere along the way, his words changed. I'm a nurse, and I've always loved helping people, being there for them when they're at their lowest. But Darius never saw the value in that. He would roll his eyes whenever I came home tired from a double shift. "You could have been more," he'd say. "You should have aimed higher. Maybe gone into medicine instead of nursing." At first, I brushed it off, thinking he was just teasing. But it wasn't teasing. He meant it. He truly thought I was beneath him. The late nights began next. He used to come home early, greet me with a kiss, maybe talk about his cases. But suddenly, there were meetings that dragged on too long, clients who needed his attention. He would walk in hours later than usual, loosen his tie, and head straight for the shower. What stood out most wasn't his excuses. It was the way he smelled. Not of stale office air or courtroom sweat, but of cologne. Expensive, floral, and definitely not the kind he wore. The first time I noticed it, my chest tightened. I asked him about it, but he laughed like I was being paranoid. "Really, Aaliyah? You think I'd cheat on you? Don't be ridiculous." He had this way of twisting things, making me feel like I was the crazy one for even asking. I wanted to believe him, so I pushed the thought away. But the more it happened, the harder it became to ignore. I started paying closer attention. The way his phone always faced down on the table. The sudden passcode he set when for years he never cared if I picked it up. The late-night text buzzes he'd brush off as work emergencies. At first, I told myself maybe I was just overthinking. But intuition has a way of whispering truths our hearts don't want to hear. One night, while folding his laundry, I found a receipt tucked in his suit jacket pocket. It was from a restaurant across town, one I knew well. The date on the slip was the same night he had told me he was working late. The bill was for two, and the wine listed wasn't anything he'd order if it were just him. My hands shook holding that piece of paper, but I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I tucked it away, deep in my drawer, where I started collecting all the little signs. Receipts, notes of dates he lied about, small details he thought I'd never notice. He thought he was smart, but I was learning to be smarter. Every lie, every shift in his tone, every smell of perfume that wasn't mine. It all became part of the quiet case I was building. He thought he was breaking me down, but really, he was giving me all the proof I needed. And deep inside, I knew the day would come when I'd use every piece of it against him. It was a Thursday night, one of those endless hospital shifts that left my body aching and my mind running on fumes. Normally, I'd go straight home, collapse on the couch, and hope Darius would at least notice I was alive. But that night, something in me refused to take the usual route. He had told me he was working late again, and my gut screamed otherwise. Instead of heading home, I decided to follow him. I parked a few blocks from his office, waiting in the dark, my hands tight around the steering wheel. Minutes crawled by until I finally saw him. He walked out of the building, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder, looking far too relaxed for someone buried in case files. He wasn't alone. A woman stepped out with him, young and polished, laughing at something he said. The way he leaned toward her, the way his eyes softened, it was a version of him I hadn't seen in years. I stayed far enough behind, following as they drove to a restaurant across town. It wasn't just any restaurant. It was the kind of place we used to go to on anniversaries, the kind of place that meant something. My stomach twisted into knots, but I forced myself to keep watching. From my car, I had the perfect view through the wide glass windows. There they were, seated across from each other, a candle flickering between them. I saw him reach across the table and take her hand. My breath caught in my throat. That simple gesture, the way his thumb brushed across her skin, felt like a knife straight to my chest. That was the way he used to touch me, back when I still mattered to him. The woman was Vanessa Carter. I'd heard her name before. She was a junior associate at his firm, just 28, sharp, ambitious, and eager to climb. Darius used to joke that women like her were too much work. Not his type at all. But there he was, staring at her like she was the only woman in the world. His smile, his posture, the sparkle in his eyes. I hadn't seen that man in years, and it broke me to realize he still existed. Just not for me. I could have stormed inside, thrown the wine glasses across the floor, screamed for the whole restaurant to hear. My body burned with the urge to confront him, to make him see the pain he'd carved into me. But I didn't move. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and started snapping photos. Each click felt like a shield, a small piece of armor protecting me from crumbling. I stayed until their meal ended, until I watched him walk her to her car and kiss her hand as though he were some gentleman out of a romance novel. My chest was tight, tears blurring my vision, but my mind was sharper than ever. That night, I drove home in silence. I didn't yell. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I had proof now, and I wasn't going to waste it in anger. If he thought he was in control, he had no idea who he was really dealing with. I was done being blindsided. From that night on, I would play the long game. I couldn't let him walk away clean. After that night at the restaurant, something in me hardened. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about 8 years of small cruelties, the quiet belittling, the times he made me feel invisible. I realized leaving quietly would let him win. He had humiliated me in front of family and friends, and that smug little smile deserved to be wiped off. So I started to plan my gift. First, I needed proof that would matter where it counted. I began by watching his habits, the same way he'd watched me when he suspected something. I learned when he took calls, where he kept receipts, how he logged expenses. One afternoon, while Darius was at the office, I made up a reason to tidy his study. I opened a drawer he never locked and found a stack of statements he must have slipped in there without thinking. My hands shook as I skimmed them. At first it looked like routine transfers and business payments, but then I found something that made my breath stop. Repeated deposits into an account with Vanessa's name on it. The amounts were big, and they matched up with dates I knew he'd lied about being at the office. I didn't touch anything. I took photos with my phone, then put the papers back exactly as they were. Proof without fingerprints. I kept digging quietly. I found more clues. Hotel receipts, a membership charge to a private club, gifts charged to a company card that had been signed off by him as client entertainment. Each piece fit into a puzzle that showed he'd been funneling marital money into her life. It was ugly, and it felt like justice to see the truth laid out in black and white. Next, I knew I needed someone who could turn those pieces into something the court would respect. I called Marcus Bell, an old family friend and a lawyer who had helped my mother years ago. Marcus was steady, direct, and he hated injustice the way I did. I told him the bare facts over coffee, careful not to spill everything in public. He listened, then asked for the documents. I slid my phone across the table and watched his face change as he scrolled through the photos. Marcus said the documents were enough to open a serious conversation with a family law judge, especially paired with a financial forensics review. He introduced me to an accountant who specialized in tracing hidden funds. Together we started mapping the transfers and matching them to dates and places. Marcus taught me legal steps I would need to take without tipping Darius off. How to file for temporary orders, how to freeze accounts if necessary, how to document evidence so it would stand up in court. For weeks I worked in the quiet, compiling copies, saving emails, recording timelines. I kept my face calm around him. I cooked dinners, smiled at the right moments, and never let him see the storm building. Inside, I was methodical and cold, arranging each piece like a present packed to cause exactly the damage it deserved. I knew exactly what I would give him on Christmas. Not jewelry, not a watch, but the ending he had chosen for us, wrapped up with proof and a lawyer's signature. The thought of watching his smug grin fade made every stolen hour worth it. Christmas morning came wrapped in fake smiles and forced laughter. Darius played his role like an actor on stage, charming and polished, the kind of husband everyone wished they had. He greeted my parents with warmth, helped my nieces unwrap their presents, and even kissed me on the cheek in front of everyone. To anyone watching, he was the picture of devotion. But I knew better. When it came time for us to exchange gifts, he slid a small velvet box into my hands. Inside was a delicate necklace, glittering under the lights of the tree. "For my beautiful wife," he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Gasps of admiration filled the space, and my mother smiled like her heart might burst. I forced a smile back, thanking him softly, letting him drape it around my neck. To them, it looked like love. To me, it was just another performance, another lie layered on top of years of betrayal. I handed him my gift next. A simple silver watch, nothing flashy. He opened it, smiled politely, and kissed my forehead as though he appreciated the thought. What he didn't know was that the real present sat hidden in a separate envelope tucked safely in my bag upstairs. Documents, receipts, and letters that could rip his perfect world apart. Every time he smirked at me that morning, every time he slid his hand across my back in front of the family, I reminded myself to stay calm. The game wasn't over yet. Around us, the house was buzzing with Christmas energy. Children tore through wrapping paper, grandparents told old stories, and the smell of cinnamon rolls and roasted ham filled the air. It was noisy, joyful, and for a moment, I envied how untouched everyone else was by the storm quietly building inside me. They didn't see the tension beneath the smiles Darius and I exchanged. They didn't notice how his laugh sounded too smooth, too rehearsed. When we all gathered for dinner, the laughter grew louder, the chatter spilling across the table. Darius carved the turkey, cracking jokes about how his knife skills could rival a chef's. Everyone laughed, and I even joined in when the moment called for it. But beneath the table, my hands stayed clenched on my lap, my nails digging into my palms. I could feel his eyes on me sometimes, that same smug confidence he wore like armor, certain I was still blind, still naive, still his to control. I lifted my glass when the toasts began, smiled when family sang carols after dessert, and hugged my nieces goodnight when they grew tired. No one saw the way my chest tightened every time Darius touched me. No one knew the truth that sat folded in crisp paper upstairs. As the night drew quieter and family trickled out into the cold, the tension between us thickened. He thought the day was ending in his control, that the necklace around my neck proved he still owned me. But only I knew the truth. My real gift was waiting, and soon he would open it whether he wanted to or not. The house was finally quiet after the last guest left. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the holiday songs playing faintly in the background, all of it faded into silence. Only the soft hum of the Christmas lights filled the room as Darius and I sat down by the tree. Wrapping paper still littered the floor, the scent of pine and roasted turkey lingering in the air. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful, like the calm after a storm. Darius leaned back in his chair, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. Then, without warning, he reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. He slid it across the coffee table toward me with the same ease someone might use to hand over a greeting card. My chest tightened as I picked it up, already knowing what it was. Divorce papers. He smirked, leaning forward as if savoring my reaction. "I think it's time, Aaliyah," he said smoothly. "I want to start fresh. You'll be fine without me. You're strong, you'll manage." His tone wasn't cruel. It was worse than that. It was casual, almost dismissive, like our 8 years of marriage meant nothing more than a contract he was now canceling. The same man who had vowed forever on our wedding day was sitting here on Christmas night, tossing our life away like a broken ornament. I could feel my throat tighten, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of watching me break. My fingers trembled slightly as I set the papers back on the table. The glow of the Christmas lights reflected in his eyes, and the smug grin on his face made my stomach turn. He thought he had all the power, that I was too blindsided to fight back. Instead of crying or begging, I looked at him quietly and asked, "Are you sure this is what you want?" For a second, he seemed surprised by my calmness. Then he chuckled, leaning back with that same arrogance he wore so well. "Of course I'm sure," he said. "I deserve better, Aaliyah. You'll thank me someday." The words hit like stones, but I kept my face steady. He wanted me to break down, to beg him to stay, to fuel his ego with my tears. But I didn't give him any of that. Inside, my heart ached, my body screamed with betrayal, but my mind stayed cold, remembering everything I had prepared. The necklace he gave me earlier sparkled against my collarbone, but it felt more like chains than a gift. I let the silence stretch between us, only the faint crackle of the fireplace filling the air. He smirked again, convinced he had won, that he had orchestrated the perfect ending. What he didn't know was that this was only the beginning, and soon, the smile he wore so proudly would disappear forever. I reached under the couch where I had hidden it earlier that day, a small, neatly wrapped envelope, tied with a simple red ribbon. I held it in my hands for a moment, letting the silence between us stretch. Darius was still smirking, still lounging back, as if this entire night was under his control. His eyes flicked toward the envelope, curious but not concerned. He thought it was some sentimental Christmas gesture, maybe a handwritten letter or a card. He had no idea. "Since it's Christmas," I said softly, sliding the envelope across the table toward him, "I have a gift for you too." He raised an eyebrow, his grin widening as he reached for it. "Didn't think you had anything left after that watch," he teased. His fingers tore the ribbon quickly, paper rustling in the quiet room. For a split second, his smile stayed. But as he unfolded the first sheet, the color drained from his face. Inside were copies of the financial transfers I had photographed. Every single transaction he had funneled into Vanessa's account. Behind that were clear photos I had taken of the two of them at the restaurant, his hand wrapped around hers, his smile reserved only for her. And on top of it all was a crisp letter drafted by Marcus, my lawyer, confirming that I had already filed for divorce 3 weeks earlier. I leaned forward, my voice steady and calm, almost too calm. "I already filed, Darius. 3 weeks ago. And since you thought it was smart to spoil your mistress with marital funds, the court will love this." His jaw tightened, his hands gripping the papers so hard they crumpled at the edges. The smug grin that had carried him through the entire evening vanished in an instant. He flipped through the pages as if hoping they would disappear, as if denial could change reality. "You," he stammered, his voice catching in his throat. "You went behind my back?" I tilted my head, watching him with the same coldness he had shown me for years. "Behind your back? No, Darius. I just got tired of being the fool in front of your face." The silence that followed was thick, heavy. His breathing grew harsher, his eyes darting from the photos to the bank statements to the lawyer's letter. For the first time in years, he looked small to me, not powerful, not in control, just small. He tried to speak again, but no words came out. His lips parted, then closed, his throat working as if he were swallowing glass. I could almost see the moment he realized that I wasn't the naive wife he thought I was. I had been 10 steps ahead, playing the game he didn't even know existed. I sat back against the couch, my hands folded neatly in my lap, watching the cracks spread across his confidence. He had given me divorce papers thinking he'd won, but the truth was simple. The game was already over, and I was the one holding the victory. Darius's face twisted, his lips curling into a sneer as he slammed the papers down onto the table. His voice rose, harsh and jagged, filling the quiet room. "You think you're clever, Aaliyah? This is manipulation. You've been plotting behind my back, twisting everything to make me look like the villain. You're pathetic." He was shouting now, pacing the room like a caged animal, his hands flailing as though volume and anger could erase the evidence lying on the table. But I didn't flinch. I didn't even raise my voice. I sat still, my posture calm, almost serene, as if his tantrum were nothing more than the background noise of a storm I had already weathered. When he turned back to me, eyes blazing, expecting me to scream back or break down, I finally spoke. My tone was soft, deliberate. I stayed quiet for a long time, Darius. But silence is not the same as weakness. His nostrils flared, his chest heaving as though the words themselves slapped him. He was waiting for me to crumble, but instead I leaned forward slightly, my eyes steady on his. And since you're so concerned about appearances, maybe you'll care to know I've already spoken with your firm's partners. Every transfer you made, every expense that touched company accounts, they'll see it. And Vanessa? She'll be under investigation too. His body froze mid-step. The anger in his face faltered, replaced with something sharper, fear. For the first time all evening, the shouting stopped. His eyes darted to the documents again, then back to me, as if trying to measure how much I truly knew. His hands trembled slightly as he clenched them into fists. You wouldn't dare, he muttered, but his voice had lost its bite. I already did, I replied calmly, my tone carrying a finality that made his shoulders sag. This isn't just about a marriage anymore, Darius. You risked everything, your name, your career, your future, for her. And the people who sign your paychecks won't forgive you so easily. The silence between us stretched long and heavy, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the mantel. His face was pale now, his eyes wide with the weight of what he had to lose. Not just me, not just the home, but the career he had built his ego upon, the one thing he thought untouchable. He cursed under his breath, pacing again, but this time his steps were frantic, uneven. He grabbed his coat, yanking it off the rack with trembling hands. Rage and panic battled across his face as he stomped toward the door. This isn't over, he spat, his voice low and shaking. And then, with a violent slam that rattled the ornaments on the tree, he was gone. I sat there in the soft glow of the Christmas lights, the papers spread neatly before me, the silence returning like an old friend. For the first time in years, I felt the power settle fully into my hands. The morning after the chaos, Aaliyah rose with a strange stillness inside her. The night's storm had passed, and though the silence in the house felt heavy, it was no longer suffocating. She slipped into her coat, carefully packed the documents she had prepared, and drove to the courthouse as the winter sun struggled to rise. Filing the paperwork wasn't just a legal step. It was the act of severing the last string that had bound her to years of betrayal. When the clerk stamped the documents, a wave of relief washed over her chest. It was done. Outside, her breath fogged in the cold air as she pulled out her phone and called the one person who had stood by her through everything, Janelle Porter. Her best friend didn't even let her finish the sentence before saying, "Come over. I'll have coffee ready." At Janelle's cozy apartment, Aaliyah sank into the couch as her friend wrapped her in a hug. No judgment, no pity, just warmth. "You did it," Janelle whispered, pulling back to study her face. "You finally chose you." Tears pricked Aaliyah's eyes, but they weren't the bitter kind she had cried so often before. These were lighter, cleansing. Days turned into weeks, and Aaliyah began to carve out a life that was hers alone. She found a small but charming apartment in a quiet neighborhood, decorated it with colors she loved, not the sterile grays Darius had insisted on. She cooked meals for one and laughed at the silly movies Janelle brought over. She lit candles at night, savoring the quiet rather than fearing it. Each morning, she woke without the dread of walking on eggshells. She found peace in her routines, a morning jog, coffee at her favorite cafe, evenings journaling about the life she was rediscovering. Her reflection in the mirror no longer looked like a woman drained by betrayal. Slowly, her smile returned, and with it, her laughter. Darius's presence, however, lingered like a ghost. The first call came late one night, his number flashing on her phone. She ignored it. Then came the texts. "We can work this out." Vanessa wasn't what I thought. "I made a mistake, Aaliyah. Please." The messages piled up, his desperation seeping through every word. But Aaliyah didn't respond. She had given him years, love, trust, and he had thrown them away. Now, his pleas were nothing more than echoes of a man who finally realized the cost of his arrogance. She deleted the messages one by one, her chest steady, her resolve unshaken. On a quiet Sunday morning, she met Janelle at their favorite brunch spot. Between bites of pancakes and bursts of laughter, Aaliyah felt something bloom inside her, freedom. For the first time in years, she wasn't surviving someone else's storms. She was building her own sunshine. And as she leaned back in her chair, smiling at her best friend, she knew there was no going back. The courthouse was crowded that morning, but Aaliyah walked through its doors with her head high and her lawyer, Marcus, by her side. The air buzzed with tension, and she could feel Darius's eyes burning into her from across the room. He looked nothing like the confident, smug man who had once shoved divorce papers at her under the glow of Christmas lights. His suit hung looser, his face was pale, and his jaw clenched tight as if the weight of his downfall was pressing harder every day. The proceedings dragged on for hours. Darius's lawyer tried to paint Aaliyah as bitter, but Marcus calmly countered every claim with facts, evidence, and the meticulous records she had gathered. Bank transfers, photos, emails. All the pieces she had collected told a story Darius couldn't escape. Vanessa's name appeared again and again in the financial trail, her expensive lifestyle funded by marital money. When Vanessa was called to testify, the humiliation was written all over her face. She avoided Aaliyah's eyes as she admitted to the gifts, the trips, the dinners, all paid for by Darius while he starved his marriage of love and respect. The judge's expression hardened with every word. By the time the ruling came, Darius's world had crumbled. The house, awarded to Aaliyah. Spousal support, granted, with enough alimony to secure her future. Half of his assets, legally hers. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder as the gavel came down, but Aaliyah didn't need reassurance. She had already won the moment she chose herself over his betrayal. Vanessa didn't leave unscathed either. Word had already spread through the law firm. Her involvement with Darius had crossed professional boundaries. By the end of the week, she was let go. Darius's once polished reputation, the one he had worn like armor, was now a tattered cloak. His colleagues whispered behind his back, clients distanced themselves, and the image he worked so hard to craft was in ruins. When the court adjourned, Aaliyah walked out into the crisp afternoon air, her heels clicking against the marble steps. Reporters lingered nearby, but she didn't stop. She didn't need to explain her victory to the world. Her freedom spoke louder than any statement could. For a moment, she paused at the bottom of the steps and looked up at the sky. The clouds were breaking, rays of sunlight spilling through, and she felt them warm her face. She realized she wasn't walking away with just assets or legal wins. She was walking into a new life. She thought back to that Christmas night, the papers shoved into her hands, the smug grin on his face. Now, that memory no longer hurt. It reminded her of how far she had come, how strong she had become. Aaliyah didn't just lose a husband that season. She gained her freedom, her strength, and the unshakable truth that she could build a future on her own terms. And with every step she took away from the courthouse, she carried that gift with her, the greatest one she had ever given herself. Do you believe Aaliyah made the right choice by leaving Darius behind and building a life on her own terms? Or should she have given him another chance? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if stories like this inspire you, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one.